Good afternoon. Welcome to Amazing Excellence Academy. Today, we are looking at the agriculture policy, which is unit number 8 of agricultural economics. Those doing agricultural economics, we are looking at unit number 8, agriculture sector. Welcome to the session and stay blessed. A policy. We start looking at a policy. You'll understand that a government policy is a statement on what government intends to do and what they are doing to support the agricultural sector or particular groups within the agricultural sector. So the government policy is actually a statement of what government plans to do and what they are doing to support the agriculture sector or particular groups within the sector. So a policy actually has 3 main elements. It has got the first component is the objectives, it has got the instruments, and it has got the rules for operating the instruments. Because the policy has the objectives, it has got the instruments, and it has got the rules for operating the instruments. The objectives, the instruments, and the rules for operating the instruments. It is the way in which the rules are set for the operation of the instruments, which determines the output of policy, and which thereby controls the extent to which the different objectives are individually achieved. So actually, it is the way in which the rules are set for the operation of the instrument, which will determine the output of policy, and which thereby controls the extent to which the different objectives are individually achieved. Okay, that is what determines actually the outcome of policy, and which thereby controls the extent to which the different objectives are individually achieved. That way in which the rules are set for the operation of the instrument, which determines the outcome of policy, and which thereby controls the extent to which the different objectives are individually achieved, is what is known as a policy. Now, examples of a policy: the Common Agricultural Policy CAP of the European Economic Community, EEC. Article 39 of the Treaty of Rome establishes the following summary of objectives. Number 1, to support farmers and farm workers' income. To support farmers and farm workers' income. They have an objective to increase efficiency and agricultural productivity, to stabilize the market. They have a program or an objective to stabilize the market, to guarantee regular supplies. They are there now to guarantee regular supplies. Okay, they are guaranteeing regular supplies, which may be actually interpreted as signifying an attachment to achieving an unspecified degree of self-sufficiency in food supplies. It may be interpreted as signifying an attachment to achieving an unspecified degree of self-sufficiency in food supplies. Ensuring reasonable prices to consumers. Okay, ensuring reasonable prices to consumers is one of their objectives. Supplementing objectives. The main set of objectives is supplemented by other relating to assisting farming, okay, by others relating to assisting farming and rural communities in more remote and otherwise disadvantaged regions, and to protect specific habitats and landscapes. Okay, so the main objective, the main set of objectives is implemented by others, those that relate to assisting farming and rural communities in more remote and otherwise disadvantaged regions, and to protect specific habitats and the landscapes. So they are there to protect specific habitats and the landscapes. So an environmental dimension is what really matters. Let's look at the number of instruments. Now, when you look at the number of instruments, many policy instruments are employed, such as import prices, right? Export subsidies, intervention buying to support prices, production quotas to control output, deficiency payment, production subsidies, investment grants, import quotas and tariffs, plus a range of measures to help dispose of and manage surplus production. Okay, so you're saying that we have a number of instruments, and many policy instruments are employed, such as number one, the import subsidies, the import prices, export subsidies, intervention buying to support prices, production quotas to control output, deficiency payments, production subsidies, investment grants, import quotas and tariffs, plus a range of measures to help dispose of and manage surplus production. Those are some of the instruments that are used. Lower developing countries, these have a different set of objectives. If you look at the lower developed countries, will actually have a different range of objectives. Actually, for most, the aim has been less to support the agricultural incomes than to find ways of enabling agriculture to support other developing areas of the economy, right? For most, the aim has been less to support agricultural incomes than to find ways of enabling agriculture to support other developing areas of the economy. So in lower developing countries, much more emphasis has been placed upon keeping food prices down, okay, by subsidizing consumers rather than producers. We are keeping the food prices down. We try to subsidize consumers instead of subsidizing producers. So on stimulating agricultural exports to contribute to the balance of payments, and on securing indigenous cotton, sugar, vegetable oil, and the fiber output for local agricultural processing industries. Okay, so this is much emphasis, like this is where much emphasis has been placed on, especially lower developed countries. So much more emphasis has been placed upon keeping food prices down, right? We are subsidizing consumers rather than producers. On stimulating agricultural exports to contribute to the balance of payments, and on securing indigenous cotton, sugar, vegetable oil, and the fiber output for local agricultural processing industries. So this is basically what we just get to have. Now let's look at the classification of policy instruments, right? How do we actually classify the policy instruments? Policy instruments. Policymakers have adopted a multitude of different instruments of influencing the behavior of the agricultural sector. One criterion or criteria of classifying policy instrument is by considering the level in the production and distribution system at which intervention is applied. So one criteria of classifying policy instruments is by considering the level in the production and distribution system at which intervention is actually applied. The first one is the frontier level instruments. The frontier level instruments alter the relationship between the domestic and the international market. Okay, these instruments, they will change the relationship that is there between the domestic and the international markets. They shift the relationship between domestic and the international prices and the volume, possibly direction of trade flows from their free trade levels, right? They change the domestic and international prices and the volume of trade flows from their free trade levels. We have got the instruments applied at the farm level, okay, farm level. These, they permit the amount and the type of economic activity in farming to be adjusted relative to the levels which would be dictated by competitive pressures from national and international markets. So instruments that are applied at the farm level, they permit the amount and the type of economic activity in farming to be adjusted relative to the levels which would be dictated by competitive pressures from national and the international markets. The market level, which is the third level. So frontier level, and farm level, and market level. This one may be used in a variety of general ways, okay? The market level. Variety of general ways. Like we set marketing boards can use their powers to raise or lower prices received by farmers, thus causing farm output to deviate from competitive levels. So you find that the farm outputs will be deviating from their competitive levels. Why? Because the state marketing boards can use their power to raise or lower prices that are received by farmers. The same can be used as a vehicle to pass food subsidies to consumers, thus raising consumption from the level it would otherwise be, or in conjunction with a frontier instrument, they can be used to raise or lower prices to producers and consumers simultaneously. So they can be used as a vehicle, okay, the farm level instrument can be used as a vehicle to pass food subsidies to consumers, thereby rising consumption from the level it would otherwise be, or in conjunction with the frontier instrument, they can be used to raise or lower prices to producers and consumers simultaneously. Shall we now quickly look at, let's look at the point of impact, the farm, and the level of imposition. What really happens? Okay, let's have the farm, the factor market. That's the point of from the factor market. The farm level, the input subsidies are there, land reform measures are implemented, investment grants and concessions are given. Okay. Then when you go to the market level, public investment in research and education actually here is experienced. At frontier level, import subsidies on machinery, import subsidies on machinery. The other point of impact is the product market now. From the factor market, let's go to the product market. At farm level, there is deficiency payments, production subsidies, okay? Deficiency payments and production subsidies. At market level, we have parastatal trading, price controls, intervention by buying, and food subsidies to consumers. We can have those parastatal trading, price controls, intervention by buying, food subsidies to consumers. All those, they are the levels, they are the ways of intervening. The frontier level, import quotas on competing products and export quota subsidies. Import quotas on competing products and the export subsidies. Let's look at now the rules of the policy. The rules of the policy. A basic rule of economic policy is that there must be at least as many instruments as there are objectives. We need as many instruments as there are objectives. It is self-evident that where there is a single objective or policy, for example, to increase grain output in a country by a specific amount above the level likely with free trade, that at least one policy instrument would be required. Okay, so the instrument chosen might be one of several, which would raise the price of grain received by producers, such as import tax or production subsidy. The other one would be an instrument to reduce the cost of grain production, such as an import subsidy or capital grant. The third one would be an instrument which reduces the return to products which compete with the cereals for land, thus causing substitution of resources into cereal production. So more than one instrument may be simultaneously employed to pursue a single objective. Let's look at the food subsidy now. There are many complex variants of this policy, but we consider the simplified version, okay? The policy may be thought of either as one in which every consumer pays less by a fixed amount per unit purchased than it has cost the seller to supply it, and where the government compensates the seller with the subsidy. So the policy may be thought of either as one in which every consumer pays less by a fixed amount per unit purchased than it has cost the seller to supply it, and the government compensates the seller with a subsidy. Or as one where for every unit purchased at the full market price, the consumer received a cash subsidy payment, okay? Or as one where every unit purchased at the full market price, the consumer received a cash subsidy payment. We will see now, observe the diagram above here. What you notice is that in the absence of subsidy, the domestic demand DD and supply SS, and the excess or import demand curve is RSTU. RSTU. That is actually the import demand curve. Introducing a consumer subsidy causes a parallel upward shift in the demand curve to D prime D. D prime D. Okay. Consumer subsidy will cause a shift, an upward shift in the demand curve. So the demand curve has shifted to upward, okay, to the right, such that the vertical distance between the two demand curves, equal the amount of the subsidy per unit. And this is the subsidy equal PW minus PS. This is actually the distance, the vertical distance between the two demand curves. Actually, will equal the subsidy per unit, and that is the subsidy will be equal PW minus PS. That will be our subsidy. Okay, so this is what you're trying to actually talk about. So the import demand also increases at all prices level, and the excess demand curve shifts upward to VWXY. So the excess demand actually again will shift upward. So as the demand shifts, even the excess demand does what? Shifts in that same manner. We will observe now that there are some of the effects. We have some effects here. The effects would be none on supply, but has an effect on consumption and consumers, especially the taxpayers. There will be effect. There will be no effect on supply, so supply remains the same. Okay, in this open economy case, but has an effect on consumption and consumers, especially the taxpayers, the subsidy. Domestic demand will increase from QD to Q prime D. Import will rise from I to I prime. So the import is rising. And then the domestic demand is actually increasing. So the demand has increased, and then even the import actually rises. We see the rise in the imports from I to I prime. There will be an increase in the consumer surplus from A, B, C, D, or A, B, C, D. All that will be consumer surplus that increases. Now, the per unit subsidy on all units consumed, Q prime D, entails a subsidy cost to taxpayers of A, B, C, D, E. A, B, C, D, E actually is a subsidy cost to taxpayers. A, B, C, D, E. A cost to subsidy taxpayers. The difference between the increased value of the consumer surplus and the subsidy cost is A, which is an economic loss. E is actually an economic loss. Okay. It is basically the difference between the increased value of a consumer surplus and the subsidy cost. Okay. So the question we ask ourselves is that, do the gainers compensate the losers? Now, since the gains are less than the loss by the value of E, the economic loss, the gainers could not fully compensate the losers. So the foreign exchange costs are DEF. DEF will actually be the foreign exchange costs, but the value of the extra consumption valued under the original demand curve DD is only D plus F. That is the value of extra consumption, D plus F. Again, the difference is shown to be E, which is that's the social welfare loss. That will be the social welfare. Those are some of the effects. The question that we give you is to compare the effect of food subsidy on the input subsidy. Compare the effect of the food subsidy, food subsidy versus the subsidy. Okay. Shall we now look at intervention buying? Intervention buying. It is common for parastatal trading corporation to undertake support buying operation to support market prices for key commodities, such as grains. Okay. In lower developed countries, such operations usually only operate intermittently in periods of unanticipated excess supply to prevent prices falling to levels which would undermine the livelihood of small farmers and discourage future production. So you find that now there is some intervention, okay, to buy. In developed countries such as the United States of America, support buying occurs with much greater frequency, with the overt objective of raising prices above normal competitive free trade levels. Okay, so in developed countries such as the United States of America, support buying occurs with much greater frequency, with the overt objective of raising prices above normal competitive free trade levels. Unlike the food subsidy that operates against the background of a domestic deficit of supply, intervention buying only occurs when domestic supply exceeds it. When we have domestic supply exceeding demand, that's when we can have domestic intervention buying, in short, in operation. Okay. For the sake of simplicity, however, we assume that the domestic market would just be balanced at the world price, and that it is the support price PI set by the intervention authority which stimulates excess supply. So the need to set a minimum import price in order to prevent the commodity being imported to selling into intervention. So there is a need to set a minimum import price in order to prevent the commodity being imported to sell into intervention. Let's look at the summary of the benefits and the costs, which follows. Nothing is excluded for storage and handling costs by the intervention authority. Number one, it is also assumed that the stocks acquired can be disposed of at world prices so that the cost of organizing intervention are simply equal to BCD. BCD can actually be the cost of organizing intervention, which is equivalent to an export subsidy of PT minus BW is equal to the cost to an export subsidy. So the intervention price minus the world price, actually, that difference. Okay. So in the absence of the intervention, buying the excess demand function is LMN, right? It's LMN. With the intervention buying, there is an excess supply curve, LMR. LMR is an excess supply. Consumer surplus loss, there is consumer surplus loss, ABC. Okay, ABC actually consumer surplus loss, ABC, right? ABC. Intervention purchase costs, BCD. BCD is the intervention purchase costs. Then the producer surplus will gain from ABC. ABC will be actually our consumer surplus gain. But a deadweight economic loss will be B plus D. B plus D, that's the deadweight economic loss. The deadweight economic loss. Let's look at the economics of food security. We pay attention and get to look at the economics of food security. So according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, security is actually defined based on the 4 pillars, right? These are availability of food, access to food, utilization of food, and stability in the supply of food. So accessibility, availability, utilization, and the stability in the supply of food. Okay. There is now this question that we give to you. So the question is, how does sustainable use of resources and environmental protection affect the agriculture sector? How does the sustainable use of the resources and the environmental protection affect the agriculture sector? And do well to answer those questions. I think they can really help you. Do you have any questions?